Hi everybody, welcome to Lectio Divina for Kids. In this video today, we're going to be going over John chapter 1, verses 19 to 28. Now this is going to be episode 2, so if you haven't watched episode 1 yet, I'll put a link down in the description below. Make sure you guys watch that video first, that way you know how to do mental prayer. Now, I'm going to go over briefly the steps, and we'll get on to the gospel lesson today. So step 1, if you guys remember, it's preparation, right? So find a quiet place without distractions. Anything that's going to distract you, try to get away from it. Step 2, recollection, meaning you're going to acknowledge that God hears your prayers and know that He's listening to you and that He's listening to you every time you pray. Step 3, as I read the gospel, you're going to close your eyes and you're going to meditate and visualize yourself actually there. And then step 4, you're having a conversation with God, okay? You're going to ask Him questions you have and you're going to reflect on a particular verse that I share with you, okay? So, we're going to go ahead and start reading from John chapter 1, verses 19 through 28. This is how John appeared as a witness. When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" he not only declared, but he declared quite openly, "I am not the Christ." "Well then," they asked, "are you Elijah?" "I am not," he said. "Are you a prophet?" He answered, "No." So they said to him, "Who are you? We must take back an answer to those who sent us. What have you to say about yourself?" So John said, "I am, as Isaiah prophesied, a voice that cries out in the wilderness, 'Make a straight way for the Lord.'" Now these men had been sent by the Pharisees, and they put this further question to him. "Why are you baptizing if you are not the Christ, and not Elijah, and not a prophet?" John replied, "I baptize with water, but there stands among you, unknown to you, the one who is coming after me, and I am not fit to undo his sandal strap." This happened at Bethany, on the far side of the Jordan, where John was baptizing. That concludes the gospel reading today. Now, I want you guys to focus on this particular phrase. It says, "But there stands among you, unknown to you, the one who is coming after me, and I am not worthy to untie his sandals." Now, to help you guys understand the context, what John is saying when he says, "I'm not worthy to untie his sandals," typically, back in those days, if you came into someone's home and they had a servant, they would be the one that would take off your shoes for you, right? And often they would clean your shoes, right? Or not your shoes, rather, they would clean your feet. Now, something very interesting is going to happen. Later on in the gospel, on the night of Jesus's Last Supper, He washes their feet, right? Now look what John is saying. He's saying, "I am not worthy to even be a slave for Jesus. I'm not even worthy to do that. I need to be lower than that," right? Which shows the great humility of John, because later on what Jesus says, he says, "There is not any person greater than John, yet those in the least in the kingdom of heaven are greater than he," right? So he greatly complimented John, because St. John was a very, very holy man. He was the one responsible for preparing the way for the Lord, right? That was his mission, that was his purpose. And in fact, before Jesus came, you know how John lived his life? How St. John lived? He ate honey and wild locusts. And think of it this way. He was the son of the priest Zechariah. Now, if you read in the Gospel of Luke, right, and if you remember, when you pray the rosary, we have the visitation, right? The time where Mary sees Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is John's mother. They lived in the hill country of Judea. Now, the hill country of Judea is kind of a wealthy part of town, right? It's actually a pretty wealthy place. Yet, what does John do? Well, he gives up all of that, and he decides to live as a hermit, right? Meaning he decides to live on his own, and in prayer and fasting, and preparing the way for the Lord, right? So he took his vocation very, very seriously. And as you can see, when we go on to our Lord's baptism, John fulfills this obligation because he is actually a descendant of the Levitical priesthood. He's technically a priest, right? And he comes from Aaron, Moses' brother. So it's pretty incredible that John was willing to humble himself in this way. Now, the Pharisees were asking him questions, right? They asked him questions like, "Are you the Christ? Are you Elijah? Are you a prophet, right? And the reason why they were asking these questions wasn't because they were particularly curious. They just wanted to know if John was the Messiah, right? Now you might be like, what do you mean? Well, at the time, there were people that did believe that Elijah was the Messiah, which is false. There were people that did believe that John could have been the Christ. In fact, there was a group of people who, even though John said, I am not the Christ, still believed he was the Christ anyway, right? Despite his words. So the lesson here is that Jesus is so hidden. So hidden. What does John say? He says, there he stands among you, right? And they were blind to it. They didn't even know who the Messiah was. They couldn't recognize him, right? And Jesus did this on purpose. Because as we're going to read throughout the Gospels, Jesus is going to slowly reveal himself more and more and more to his apostles and more to his followers. And by doing this slow reveal of himself, he helps us understand more deeply and more intimately what he means by him being the Son of God, right? Now, there are people, despite that, despite all the parables that Jesus teaches, all the fulfillment of the prophecies that are found in the Old Testament, all the miracles that he does, and people still don't believe, right? But this is how our relationship with God is going to be. It's a long process. It's a lifelong journey. Our journey to knowing God and to loving him more doesn't start and end in one day. It doesn't start and end in the one time you go to church or one time you go to Mass. It's a continual renewal of that every single time you get into prayer. And you get to know him deeper and deeper and deeper. And guess what? We won't know God fully until we're in heaven. And even so, right, there's always so much to learn about God. And there's always so much to learn about Jesus. So my invitation for you today is to meditate, okay? Is to meditate upon seeing Christ in everything. Meaning, try to see Christ in everyone. I don't know if you've been through this, but sometimes when I'm trying to watch TV, I'm trying to find the remote. And I look around and I don't see the remote anywhere. I'm searching for it. Maybe I'm looking under the couch. Maybe I'm looking in random places that don't make sense. I'll look in the pantry. I'll look in the bathroom somehow, or I'll look in my dog's crate. I'll do random things like that until I walk by it, and then it's like, oh, it's just on the counter. I walked by it like 5 times. And sometimes this is how we treat Jesus. We treat God, because he'll give us signs, he'll give us things for us to draw our attention, but we don't notice it. We don't look in the obvious places. Now, what are the obvious places that we can look? Well, the church. God gave us the church. Jesus Christ gave us the Catholic Church because he wanted to give us a guide and a blueprint to follow that will allow us to get to know him better through the lives of the saints, through the teaching of the magisterium, through the teachings of all of the early church fathers and all the apostles and all the bishops, right? He gave us that as a guide to help us get to know him. In fact, the method that I'm showing you guys today and some of the things that I'm getting from the Gospels actually have been interpreted by church fathers, have been interpreted by saints. I'm just repeating stuff that I've heard before, right? So I want you guys to remember that you can find Jesus truly present in the Blessed Sacrament. You can go see him, right? You can talk with him. You can converse with him. He wants you to be his friend, right? And he's also our Lord, but he also wants you to converse with him like you would a friend, right? But just remember, every time you pray, God hears you. He listens to you and he loves you. My invitation for you today is to meditate upon this phrase, this verse. But there stands among you, unknown to you, the one who's coming after me, and I am not worthy to untie his sandals. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and God bless you.